Welcome to Herdly, where books turn into 3 stories, refreshing your knowledge in minutes. Today we listen to Michael Klausner in the book Deals, the Economic Structure of Business Transactions, in which we probe into how economic principles shape the negotiation, structuring, and execution of business transactions, highlighting the balance between legal frameworks and economic incentives. Michael Klausner is Nancy and Charles Munger, professor of business and professor of law at Stanford Law School, specializing in corporate law and financial regulation. Don't go away. Herdly, the editor, will be right back with the story. Let's dive into 3 memorable stories that shed light on how economic principles shape the world of business transactions. The first story takes us to the vibrant world of Hollywood. A well-known producer was in the midst of negotiating a slate financing deal with a group of hedge funds. The stakes were high, 15 movies over 5 years, all requiring substantial investment. But the challenge wasn't just about securing the funds, it was about convincing the investors that these films would succeed in an unpredictable market. Instead of relying solely on past successes, the producer did something ingenious. He secured a pre-distribution agreement with a major studio, committing them to advertise and distribute all the films in the slate. This wasn't just a commitment, it was a signal of confidence in the producer's ability to deliver quality films. The studio's involvement acted as a third-party assurance to the investors, showing that the producer wasn't just making a promise, he had the backing of a major player in the industry. This move ultimately sealed the deal, with investors confident in the lower risk and higher potential returns. The producer's ability to align the studio's and the investors' incentives through careful structuring is a classic example of how understanding economic principles can make or break a deal. Our second story unfolds in the biotech industry, where a small company had developed a groundbreaking drug. The company needed a large pharmaceutical partner to finance the final stages of development and handle distribution upon approval. However, the small company faced a significant challenge. It had deep knowledge of the drug's biology, but lacked expertise in manufacturing and navigating the competitive landscape. During negotiations, instead of merely providing optimistic projections, the biotech company proposed a contingent value right, CVR, to the potential partner. This mechanism deferred a portion of the payment until after the drug's market performance was assessed, aligning both parties' incentives. The pharma company would pay more if the drug met certain milestones, which encouraged them to fully commit to the drug's success post-launch. This innovative use of CVRs demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of economic incentives, creating a partnership where both parties were motivated to maximize the drug's success rather than front-loading all the risks and rewards. The third story takes us into the world of high-stakes real estate. A developer was eyeing a prime piece of land for a new shopping center. The catch? He wasn't sure if he could secure a lease with a major retailer, which was crucial for the success of the shopping center. Instead of rushing into a purchase, the developer negotiated a free look option with the landowner. This allowed him to secure the right to buy the land at an agreed price, but only if he could first finalize a lease with a major tenant. While this seemed like a win for the developer, the landowner wasn't left out in the cold. In a market as hot as this one, taking the land off the market came with significant opportunity costs. So, the developer agreed to pay a fee for the free look, which would be waived if the purchase went through. This arrangement allowed both parties to move past an information hurdle that could have killed the deal. The developer got the time he needed to secure the lease, while the landowner was compensated for the risk of losing other potential buyers during the free look period. This story highlights how economic principles like risk sharing and the value of time can be skillfully balanced to create a win-win situation in complex negotiations. After exploring these stories, it's clear that economic principles are not just abstract concepts. They're the tools that shape the reality of business transactions. These stories illustrate how understanding and applying these principles can lead to innovative deal structures that align incentives, manage risk, and ultimately, create value for all parties involved. The underlying theme across these narratives is the delicate balance between legal frameworks and economic incentives. In the first story, the producer's use of third-party assurance shifted the risk perception of the investors, transforming the deal's dynamics. In the biotech example, the CVR mechanism allowed both parties to share the risk and reward more equitably, aligning their goals for the drug's success. Lastly, the real estate developer's free look option provided a practical solution to a high-stakes negotiation, leveraging time and opportunity cost to satisfy both parties. What these stories have in common is their demonstration of how economic principles drive the structuring and execution of deals. The participants didn't just rely on legal contracts, they understood the importance of economic incentives and how to align them effectively. This understanding allowed them to navigate complex transactions, mitigate risks, and maximize the potential for success. As the editor of Herdley, through learning these, we can envision a future where our understanding of economic principles empowers us to craft innovative solutions in negotiations, turning potential conflicts into collaborative opportunities. In exploring how economic principles shape the negotiation, structuring, and execution of business transactions, we've seen how critical it is to balance legal frameworks with economic incentives. To reinforce this, let me share one final story. A tech startup was negotiating a merger with a larger competitor. The startup had a unique software platform, but it was still in its early stages, and the future was uncertain. To overcome this, they proposed a staggered payment structure. The initial payment was modest, but the larger payments were contingent on the startup hitting specific milestones post-merger. This arrangement reduced the risk for the larger company while allowing the startup to prove its value over time. The staggered payments not only aligned the incentives between the two parties, but also provided the startup with the motivation and resources to meet its growth targets. This deal structure exemplified how understanding economic principles can lead to creative solutions that satisfy both sides. This story, like the others we've discussed, highlights how economic principles are the backbone of effective deal-making. They provide the flexibility and foresight needed to navigate complex business landscapes, ensuring that transactions are not just legally sound but economically beneficial for all involved. As the editor of Herdley, reflecting on these lessons, we can approach future negotiations with a sharper understanding of how to balance risk and reward, creating deals that stand the test of time